Hey guys, today in this video I'm going to show you how to make a bouncy beat for Tommy Richman. Be sure to stick around as I'll show you a secret sauce plugin that is key to getting this sound right. Before I start though, be sure to like, comment and subscribe and check out the links below. There you will find the full track and a link to the drum kit that I used to make this beat. So first of all, I layered these hats on top of each other. I had one that was already just a loop and it's just doing a two-step pattern. And then I layered it in with my own hat, which is changing pitch just to give this a little bit more movement. And I mixed that in quite low beneath the other hat. This is what it sounds like by itself. And then this is what they sound like together. So if you listen in your headphones, you can hear there's definitely a lot of movement. There's a little bit of stereo image on the OG hat. After that, I laid in the snare, which I added a little bit of compression and a little bit of EQ just to tame some of those frequencies I didn't like. And then I put back in also a little bit of the high frequency around the 8,000 mark using this Pultec EQ, which I think sounds real nice. And this is what the snare sounds like by itself. I layered that with a rim. There's no processing on this channel. This is what the rim sounds like by itself. And this is what the hats and the snares sound like together. I then layered two kicks on top of each other. First of all, I had this short kick. You can see again that nothing crazy is going on in this pattern. Just played around until I found a bounce that I like. And I actually layered that with this other kick, which has got a bit more low end frequency to it, playing the exact same pattern. And I think this just evens out the sound. So this is what the low kick sounds like by itself. You can hear there's a lot more of that low end information in that signal. I then bust these two kicks together and actually just put a little bit of distortion on them just to make them meld together a little bit. Almost sounds like one kick. So this is what it sounds like now with my drums, with the kick, snare and the hi-hats all together. So the last thing that I actually added for this drum loop was actually just this little clav sound. Clav, I have no idea how you actually say it. So I stole this from a loop where I found it, and I think this sounds exactly like the clav that they actually use in the Tommy Richman $1 Million Baby song. You can hear it's actually got a hat layered over the top of it, but I wasn't really too worried about that. And then once you add this in, I think this definitely just gives you that vibe of chopped and screwed, ASAP Rocky, and that real South style drum loop. Cool. So that's the drums. On the drum bus itself, I did a little bit of processing. I chucked on just a Pro C as well, just to pull those drums together a little bit nicer. I chucked some decapitator on. You can see I'm actually punishing it and turning that drive up. It's really important to make sure that the drums for this Tommy Richman style are really distorted and grimy sounding. So I didn't mix too much of this in. It's only got about 1/3 of the wet signal of the decapitator actually going in. And then finally, I just added a little stealth limiter by T-Rex, which will just hold those drums together and make them sit in the mix nicely. And this is what the drum loop sounds like with all that on. So as you can see, it's nothing crazy. It's pretty standard stuff. Just making sure that it's all mixing and sitting nicely. Make sure you're choosing the right samples. I think a key to the Tommy Richman sound is using short, stabby, almost lo-fi sounding keys that have a little bit of movement to the pitch. And so I'll show you how I came up with this sound. I actually started with this Analog Lab plugin, which is just the simple E-piano that came default with Analog Lab. I'm doing a little bit of EQ just to remove some frequencies that I didn't like. And this is what that sound sounds like by itself. Again, super simple, nothing too crazy. What I did though, is I layered on top of that this Omnisphere sound, Keys Dawn, which is just from a Martians pack I've had for a while. This sound is more like a mallet sound that I layer on top of the keys. So this is what it sounds like by itself. And the idea there is I wanted a little bit more attack, but I think that that E-piano by itself sounded pretty nice. This is what they sound like together with no processing. So you can hear that mallet's just giving a little bit more attack on that sound. I then added compression here, just nothing too crazy. It's just pushing that signal together a little bit. I then added this new plugin from UAD called Verve Analog Machines. I really like this. I've been using this a lot. And all I did was add a bit of drive and some warble, which is very similar to the RC20 wobble effect. I then added some EQ to push up the sides. So this is using mid-side EQ. I've reduced the signal in the middle a little bit, and I've added some signal on the sides just to make this a little bit more stereo. I then accentuated that by adding Ozone Imager 11. And in this one, I'm pushing up the high frequencies to be more stereo while I'm reducing the amount of stereo content again in the lower end. I then decided I want to up the ante with the wobble. So now I've got RC20 doing a little bit of wobble. We got warble and wobble. And then finally added a bit of micro shift too, just to give it a little bit more of that same stereo detune effect. So this is what the keys and the drums sound like together. So I added another keys layer that just appears in the mix throughout the song. This is just using the Juno 6 Mellow Piano preset. I've got a little bit of compression, some more imaging, some more warbling and wobbling from RC20, and then I just filtered this one out. So this is what it sounds like without the processing. And this is what it sounds like with the processing. Again, you can hear that Verve Analog Machines from UAD is really adding some nice grit to it, and I think that this plugin is really helpful when trying to make this style. So that's almost it for the instruments. I added one more thing in here right at the end that just comes in, which is a nice little lead I found, again, just using an Analog Lab preset called Energy Lead, EQing some things that I didn't like, adding a bit of reverb, panning it back and forth between the left and right, which I really like for leads because that sort of, throws you back to that G-Funk Dr. Dre era. And then I just auto filter that sound out. So this is what it sounds like by itself. And this is what it sounds like in the mix. So you can see I've turned it right down and just panned it a little bit to the left. So even though it's auto panning, it sort of sits somewhere on the left side of the mix. And I think that's just a nice little thing to add towards the end of the song. All right. Time for the fun bit. Time for the bit that really makes Tommy Richman sound like Tommy Richman. We're talking about the bass. For this beat, I use two bass sounds. The first one is a Serum preset called Bass Essential that I got off Splice. And to that, I've actually just boosted the low end using the Pultec EQ. I have chopped all of the frequencies after about 155 to make space for the other bass sound. And I've also made this signal much more mono, especially beneath that 150 range or so. This is what the sub bass sounds like by itself. On top of that, I've actually added a stereo bass, and I'm using the Stupid 8 preset called Inflamed. It follows the same pattern, but it adds a nice little saw sound to the bass that really makes it punch through on the mix. On top of that, I added some decapitator, another EQ, which is again cutting everything below 150 to make space for the sub. I've then got a filter that is enabled during some of it just to reduce some of that really bright sound. Here's what that bass sounds like by itself. So you can hear it's got that really punchy saw 80s sound. I then sent both of these basses to a bus in which I've got a little bit of volume automation, a compressor just to meld those two sounds together, a sidechain compressor just to drop the signal of both the basses when the kick plays, a little bit more distortion, and a little bit more EQ just to remove some of those frequencies that added together. So this is what the beat sounds like with the drums, the keys, and the bass all together. You've got the heavy drums, the bouncy bass line, the short, sharp keys, and then the smooth vocal, which I think just pulls the beat together nicely. I added this bell tree, which is a nice little transition part for various parts of the beat. I've obviously got my tag and a reverse swell, which happens just before the drop.
Fucking flawed, somebody.
I've also got this tape stop plugin, which I'm using as a transition sound between two sections. Finally, I added in a scratch, which is another way to just transition between two sections. Okay, now for the bit that you guys have been waiting for. I'm going to show you the secret sauce plugin that you can put on your master to get that VHS Tommy Richman sound. I've added this plugin, the UAD tape recorder, and I've got it on this thick saturation preset. What I actually did is put it in a return track, and then I sent the entire track to that return track. Here's what it sounds like soloed with just the tape recorder playing. And here's what it sounds like with the whole beat. You can hear the drums and the bass are just breaking up nicely and adding a layer of grit that really gives the beat some depth. If you want to go really crazy with this plugin, you can just slap it on the master. Let's see what that sounds like. Thanks for watching, guys. Hope you learned a few tips and tricks. Be sure to click the link below to get the $1 Million Baby kit, which will give you all the sounds that I used in making this beat, and use the code Floyd24 to get 50% off. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.